Video 1 of why I left Christianity and why I converted to Islam. Briefly, I made reference to my experience in counseling, Christian counseling, in a previous video. And I'm not sure how I explained it then, but this is my understanding of my experience now. I feel as if I had studied the Gospels and tried to internalize them to the best of my ability. And for me, it was ultra beneficial, life-changing. As I sought to continue to grow in these teachings, manifest them, live them in my life, I realized I came to a point where I had some internal contradictions. Mine would be concerns about my sexual expression and my inability to maintain my own sexuality in a dignified way. I explained it previously. So, in counseling, as a result of studying those teachings, I had some very specific concerns and questions about myself as a person, how maybe more the internal, my heart would work, or maybe I feel I was probably trying to unpack some emotions and things like that. And as stated previously, the gentleman didn't have any information. It turned out he was in my situation, but 15 years farther down the road. He had secrets that he had to keep from his wife, etc. That wasn't my plan. So that is the genesis of me leaving the Christian faith. I'm going to say about no more than 3 years after that, probably closer to 2, I was officially out. And then 14 years later is when I convert to Islam. There's a whole lot in between those years. However, I'm going to explain my conversion based on where I am right now. So currently, I am 51 years old. I converted, what did I say, 14 years ago. Gradually, and as my knowledge increased and my understanding increased, I have been implementing the various Islamic practices into my life. However, there has also always been a substrata of, I would dare say, spirituality or questioning, because when I left Christianity, it was because I had questions that the individuals I was going to, I couldn't really get any solid life experience answers because so many of those people were in the same situation I was in, and they were not asking for help. So that complicated my situation, my search. But I always had that undercurrent of trying to understand these deeper aspects of myself. That is actually what led me to convert to Islam. So, for me, the easiest way probably to explain what my conversion meant or what it means to me, the easiest way for me to describe it is that I would say right now I am in the middle of the most difficult time of my life, the most emotionally strenuous, the most mentally strenuous, and in the middle of it, thank God, I still find ways to be creative and to gain understanding, and then more so to humanize myself. So what I found was, as I go through difficulties, I tend to have more of a animalistic defensive stance. That's never good and it's never productive. So as I was going through this phase of my life, prior to moving back to Pennsylvania, this would make more sense. Right before we drove into the state, my wife and I were discussing things that we felt were important to us and what we wanted to maintain as we went forward in this new phase of our life, because it was new to us and we had our own apprehensions. Because we were supposed to be in Hawaii, off grid, I was supposed to be playing the bongos and making music, and that was it. So as we went into this new phase, myself and my wife, we had a discussion on certain practices that we felt were helpful, that would help us navigate our new experiences. And I had been studying this book called The Resonance of Allah by Baba Muhyiddin. And I felt like when I was reading that, I was it allowed me to gain more understanding of myself and make decisions based on higher principles as opposed to animalistic tendencies of selfishness, self-protection, greed, fear, lust, hatred, anger, any of those things. So I pursued that and looked into it deeper and deeper. And as I go through this difficult time in my life, where I'm at right now currently in my life, several years ago, when we first moved back, maybe a year after we moved back, I knew that some things were going on emotionally. And there was too much going on in my life to process, because there's just so much in our new situation that I knew this was beyond my ability to handle all of this by myself. And what gave me the confidence to go to counseling, to step outside of my own personal circle and go outside and ask for help, was that I had been reading, this is what I'm reading now. So this is called Wisdom of the Divine by Baba Muhyiddin. The other book I was telling you about, I finished it, and then I started to get a better understanding of what this was, because I'm explaining my Islamic practices to you. This is how I can explain it. There is the Quran. Then there is commentary on the Quran, which expounds the principles of the Quran. This is a 2-volume commentary on the Quran, written from a Sufi perspective. At the same time that I was reading The Resonance of Allah, I got that commentary. Then I started to see what it was. This information, to me at present time, to the best of my understanding, is commentary on the Quran from such an angle, level, degree, that sometimes it just seems like commentary on nature, the movements of your own body and life forces, etc. So for me, so this is why I study this type of information. This volume, Wisdom of the Divine, Volume 1, I haven't finished it yet, but right after I finished The Resonance of Allah, I was going to turn around and read it again. Then I came across this, and this seemed to distill the information into a very basic form that, for me, was helpful. Again, now I engage in like traditional salat, traditional prayers, and study the Quran, etc. And I think that when I left Christianity, The issue was when I went for help, I had questions about my heart, which is what the gospel spoke about. I had more metaphysical concerns about my mind, my feelings. And when I felt like my physical self was running away with what I thought my deeper self was, and I would violate my own principles and beliefs. So I left because I was having those types of questions, and I couldn't get any straightforward answers. So when I read these books, I find ways to regulate myself, to give priority to the deeper, higher, evolved feelings that I have. It's better to be, like Jesus said, it's better to give than to receive. It's very hard, especially this is 2024, almost 2025. And I was living in a van and I was out there for tripping for like 20 years. So when I pop back in, it is better to give than it is to receive. But it's so hard to give, and it's so out of character with whatever is going on right now that it's tough. But to read these things, it allowed me to accept my humanity and then to accept the struggle that it is to be a human, and then to put your life together in a way that harmonizes with my belief in God. It's a slow, difficult process, and I'm thankful that I engage in it. So this is what I left Christianity because of. I had questions about my heart, my own emotions and feelings, different inconsistencies in my life, and it just didn't seem like I could really put my finger on something I could do or some practice or something I could read that would help me understand it. So I would always encounter individuals who had the exact same problem, yet they were still in authority. And then other times I would encounter resistance, hostility, because this is not everybody's desire to talk about these types of things. For me, they are uncomfortable. So for everybody else, they're uncomfortable. But when I converted to Islam, the strain of thought or the whatever, I was following that strain of, that was the essence of my search, to find some way to bring balance and health into myself. I converted under those circumstances. And when I study these books, and I find more so broadly within Sufism, with all of its expressions, what I found within Islam was a way to look at myself, to take the honest and difficult look at myself, and then understand the necessity of changing, and then to be willing to put forth the effort to change, and all by God's grace and mercy. That would be essentially it. I think I'm going to look at it. I'm going to talk about other stuff, but I'm going to go back maybe and give deeper details into it. But to encapsulate it, that was it. I left Christianity because I could not find a level of discussion or teaching that would help me to untie some of these deep-rooted, dare I say, generational knots in my life, in the way that I socialized. That was the basis of, once I realized that as a Christian, I do believe that was the basis for every single move I made after that. Name change, etc. Everything after that. I made those decisions based on trying to get information that would allow me to gain and maintain equilibrium as I live, just as a human, without because I believe in God, but I I feel when the Christianity that I was involved in had a lot of spook stuff up front. It was all miracles and phenomenon and Holy Ghost revival and the miraculous. And then once I step behind the curtain, those same people are sicker, broker, worse off, more destructive, racist than the outside world, because it was more smoke and mirrors. And then I felt like I needed some hands on actual things that I could see and do to begin to understand what was really going on in my life. I'll end it with this, because the gentleman that I was in counseling with, Christian, but then he was also a psychiatrist, I believe psychologist. And these are just his beliefs. These are my beliefs. But we had a discussion where it came down to whether or not I could accept the fact that my problems were demonic possession or influence. I could not at that time, because I had read enough information that he had given me, because I was reading Christian books at the time. So this woman, Eileen Payne, wrote a book, I believe, called Broken Image. I think I still have one of those. And Crisis in Masculinity. It was a woman who wrote this book. She's a Christian lady. So he gave me a book, or somehow I came across those books while I was in counseling with him. And I had to make a decision between him telling me that this was all demonic, you can pray and have these things cast out, etc., and her information, where she was a Christian, but then she also promoted the idea that sometimes Jesus would walk you out of these situations. It's not going to be miraculous. There's a knot. Sometimes Jesus goes in and unties the knot. It's a knot in your mind. Who knows your heart? So I was torn between, I'm almost positive I got those books on my own and read those apart from him, because now I remember who recommended them to me. So this was apart from my counseling. So I had to decide between a miraculous deliverance or the long walk out. And I knew, I told him, I said, I'm reading this stuff. He was giving me books on demon possession and things like that. I said, I don't think this is my situation. I think I need to talk some things out and learn some things and develop some character traits, etc. So that's why I converted to Islam, because after the smoke and mirrors were gone, there was no technique to grow in the circles that I was in. I became frustrated and left. I converted because at some point I started to pick up on information that would allow me to get better understanding of myself and to take more responsibility for myself, because I knew I was making bad decisions. No matter how many times I was prayed for, sometimes I was just making bad decisions. And it was my fault. But that was the breaking point. I think I'm going to do another video. I'm going to go through some of the other things that I was doing out there after I left Christianity. But that's why I left. I was looking for answers, and I didn't get any till I started to study Sufism. And it was so intellectually stimulating, yet also it was deeply satisfying, because I could change things in my heart. And I feel I was taught how to look at myself and make assessment of myself. It's horrible to do, but at the same time, I read this gentleman's books. This is the one I'm reading now. One I read when I really was when I needed some answers, and when I was going through all the stuff I was going through. This is not the only place I've heard this information to, but I enjoy this format. However this is introduced is very significant to me. But the most basic thing that I learned that helped me as I went through this was every difficult situation that you encounter, if you go in and inspect it deep enough, there is a blessing in there. There's a blessing inside of it. And that was so helpful. That allowed me to go through difficult stuff, accept my humanity, yet be able to flourish and choose to communicate rather than withdraw, and reach out rather than huddle into a corner. So I believe that Islam, under the expression that I converted into, it was my way of contacting my humanity and finding answers that I needed to live as a human, upright, healthy, without contradictions. All right, I'm going to maybe do another one and talk about the other areas I was involved in.